So welcome everybody. We're glad you could join us. Thanks to those of you who have participated in the chat while we were waiting to get ready. And if you haven't yet, feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from, as well as what is your biggest concern as you think about a healthcare directive. So hopefully you're here for the Advanced Care Planning Now More Than Ever webinar. And it's offered by the University of Minnesota Extension. Both Lori and I are educators with the University of Minnesota Extension, and we will be sharing with you. If you have questions and comments, we'll be using chat. So again, my name is Sam Roth. I work in Scott and Carver counties as their financial capability educator. And Lori Hendrickson, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I'm not sure what office you're based out of.
Sure. I'm Lori Hendrickson. I'm an extension educator out of the Grand Rapids Regional Office in Family Resiliency also. And I want to just say thank you to Sam. We've had Sara Croymans was supposed to be here teaching today, had a family emergency, and Sam stepped in to do this. So I really, truly appreciate that she's done that today.
Yeah. You're more than welcome. So we just want to go through a few webinar basics before we begin. We do ask that you mute yourself so that we don't have, extra distractions coming in. Please use the chat box and respond to questions and ask questions as you have them. We will be monitoring that. And if it's, in an upcoming slide, we probably won't answer it till we get to that slide. If it's something that's pertaining to the topic we're on, we'll make sure to try to answer it. And then we'll review them all at the end to make sure. Also participate in the polls we have. It's great information for all of us to understand, where we're at and what we know or don't know. And we do send up a follow-up email that will give you access to the links and resources that we mentioned, as well as slides to our PowerPoint presentation and an archived webinar link as well. Also, if you haven't been on Zoom before, I did put on the live transcript. So if you're seeing that and it bugs you, feel free to, you can hide that yourself underneath your more. So we're going to start with our first poll. And this poll is, why are you participating in today's webinar? Is it for personal use or professional use, or for both personal and professional use? And it seems like we have some well-known poll takers. So there. I'll give you about 10 more seconds to complete the poll. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and share the results. For over half of you are here for personal use, a few of you just for professional use, and then the rest for both personal and professional use. So thank you for doing that. And Nona said personal use in the chat, so excellent. So again, advanced care planning, exactly what does that mean? So advanced care planning is thinking about our healthcare decision-making in times of incapacity, whenever that may be. We're also going to tackle some of the terms and language that may not be familiar to everyone. And most importantly, hopefully help you understand what information others need to know when someone can't communicate for themselves around healthcare decisions. We're going to focus on the Minnesota Health Care Directive basics, and we'll talk about common myths and facts and sort those out and introduce you to some resources. If you are from a different state, we do have a resource that will include that can help you find information for your state specific.
All right, so let's start off talking about the why we're talking about healthcare decision making. And as we're talking about this, we are looking at adults of all ages. We all face the risk of incapacity, and healthcare directives are an important issue for any age group. We know that no one is exempt at this point from any risk of accident, illness, injury. And even more clearly, that has come to be seen in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's added a lot of alertness to healthcare risks that we face. It's also called attention to the end of life planning and the need to do that. Now, there have been many visible cases over the years related to end of life care And if you might remember, I do remember that the Terry Schiavo case in Florida, and that lasted over 15 years. She fell ill in 1990 with cardiac arrest, and between the years of 1998 and 2005, there was a court battle between her husband and her parents and whether or not to keep her on life supports. And so if you think about that, one of the things we're going to talk about is, do people understand what you really truly would want? And so it's important to think about that as we move forward here. We don't want those situations to happen because they're stressful for our family. Our situation of what we would like, our wishes are not shared. And so we need to make accommodations for this. So our healthcare system is based on the assumption that a person should be able to share their preferences and wishes. And again, that challenge is that we don't all think alike. As a patient, I might think that my family knows my preferences and what I would want. And what if that's not the case? Would those around you understand what your wishes truly are? So your right to make those decisions does not end because of incapacity. And that's where the next step comes in, and that is advanced care planning. And advanced care planning might be a term that's new to you. It might be unfamiliar. It literally means literally refers to planning in advance by sharing your preferences and wishes. And that increases the odds that the patient's preferences will guide their care in the event that they are not able to make the decisions and communicate the decisions themselves. Now, keep in mind that there are boundaries and limits to what you can ask for. One example of this would be that in Minnesota, assisted suicide is not legal. And so if that were part of your preferences and you were in Minnesota, you would not, you would assume that that would not be carried out based on the law. Again, this is relevant to all adults. Things get very complex when we don't know what somebody wants and they face incapacity. So the importance of advanced care planning is critical. And so next we're going to go on to a poll with the next question to answer. So where are you in the process of advanced care planning? Do you understand your state-specific planning options? Have put your wishes in a legal document? Some of you have already been telling us this in the chat. You've communicated your decisions, need to update, have all good intentions, but have not taken action. Need to learn some basics, or need to face my fears in silence. I'll give you a little bit longer here. So we're over 80% now that have answered. Okay. And so we're sharing the results there. You should see that 41% have good intentions, but have not taken action yet. More of you need also have communicated decisions with others at 30%, need to update plans at 22%, need to get some of the basics, 32%. So that's great. Well, hopefully we'll get you some answers today, and those of you that need to update will also be taking that action as we move forward. That's great. Thank you all for participating in that. We have one other poll for you here now. Myth or fact? Which of the following are true about advanced care planning in the US and in Minnesota? A majority of adults have healthcare directives. Most families have had conversations about their wishes and preferences. C, family members can typically predict what decisions others would make and why, or D, none of the above. I think this one's going to be hands down here. Give you a little bit longer if you want to still get in on the poll. Okay, and as we share those results, we see that 83% of you said none of the above. Yeah, we'll talk about that moving forward here. Let's take a look at the next slide then, and we'll see what the situation actually is. So research suggests that the majority of Minnesotans are not prepared and do not have advanced care plans in writing. Many trust that family members will decide for them, but most family members have not talked about it and are uninformed. And family members typically are not able to predict the decisions that others would make or why. And that includes longtime spouses and adult children. And I wish Marlene Stum was here to talk about some of this, because she has such good studies that back up this information, and she talks quite a bit about that. 62% of Minnesotans 50 and older have not filled out a healthcare directive, and they have no document explaining their wishes. Those 50 to 59, almost 3/4 have no healthcare directive. And if you compare this, then 45% of those over 75 have no healthcare directive. Generally, we see that those that have been diagnosed with life-threatening illnesses, older individuals, those that might be in skilled nursing facilities, are more likely to have completed those advanced care planning documents than the general population. And often that comes because people are asked when they are admitted to a care facility, whether it be a hospital, assisted living, nursing home, if there is a planning in place for them. Well, if only we had talked about this. It's way too often that family members will say things like this, and the best way to help ensure that your wishes will be known and followed in the event of incapacity is to put your wishes in writing and communicate with your family members and your healthcare providers and anybody else that might be involved, and to do this before a crisis occurs. We know there are many benefits to preparing now. Planning ahead truly eases the burden for family members. And again, individuals trust that their family members will make good decisions for them. But when family members don't know, it places a burden on those family members as well. And if you haven't communicated in advance, there might be feelings of guilt, frustration, just that second guessing of what may have happened, all the what ifs. Planning ahead can really reduce the stress during a medical emergency, and it reduces a person's own fear and worry about their future health care. For individuals with without family or friends close by, putting those wishes in writing provides a written record to make sure that their wishes will be known. And a lot of people feel that they have a sense of relief after they've finally faced this and thought about it. And I will tell you that as an adult child of someone who had to rely on a healthcare directive, that the first time that I actually heard my dad, when he was asked the question in the hospital, say, what his preferences were, I really thought I would know what his preferences were, and was surprised to find that I did not know. And when he actually did need his healthcare directive as he went in the ambulance, I remember my mom coming out of the house with the healthcare directive in hand and handing it to the EMTs to take it with. And so we knew that he was covered as a result. And having that in hand and knowing that your wishes will be followed really does reduce that burden. So we're going to look at the critical information, and basically your healthcare directive has two pieces of information in times of incapacity: who and then what? Who do you want to make those decisions? And then what are those preferences and wishes? And those are the central pieces of the healthcare directive. And we're going to take a look at both of those today. So to get you thinking a little bit about this, we're going to take a look at a couple of scenarios here. The first one is Anna. And so let's just walk through this example. Anna was hit. She was hit head on by a drunk driver. She has permanent brain damage and multiple internal injuries. Rick is Anna's husband, and he believes that Anna would not want further treatment given earlier conversations about the probability of no recovery and future quality of life. But there is nothing in writing at this time. And Anna's parents and two sisters believe that everything should be done to prolong Anna's life. So if you would, in the chat, please share, if you were Anna, who would you want to make your choices and why? And what would be the most important things you would like to have considered? And we will come back to these later, but if you will think about that, and if you'd like to share them now, you certainly can in the chat. Okay, so we will go on then to the next scenario to think about as you're maybe writing in the chat or just jotted things down. We'll move on. And this is a little bit more current of an example. Jose is 70. He is very healthy, active. He's an independent widower. He's been diagnosed with severe COVID-19 and hospitalized and in the intensive care unit. And right now he's unable to communicate. His significant others include a polite but distant relationship with a daughter who lives in another state. He also has two siblings he's always been close to, and they live nearby. And he has a special friend that he spends a lot of time with and shares common interests. And again, if we think about Jose, if you were Jose, who would you want to make your healthcare decisions and why? And again, what would be the most important things to consider? And so think about that. And again, you can share those in the chat if you'd like to right now, or just think about them. And we will.
Lori, I'm just going to share that most people who have talked about Anna or who put in the chat have said that her husband, Rick, because they've had that conversation. A few people have talked that her parents and sisters would be their choice, as well as, thinking about the quality of life is one of the most important things they'd like to have considered, keeps being the one that comes up. And so far for Jose, we have a little bit of everything. So,
as I look at the situation for Anna, if that does kind of follow along with the Terry Schiavo, the husband versus the family of origin, and where would you, and again, if there is no directive that gives information, you're putting your family at odds with one another again. So yeah, it's a difficult place to be. Sam, I'll let you continue on there.
Sounds great. So we're going to define a little bit about advanced directive language. And I do want to acknowledge there have been some questions in the chat, and I'm hoping we answer them in the near future. If not, like I said, we'll go back at the end to make sure we have those questions answered. So what is an advanced directive? It is what it says. It's a directive, and you're sharing directions in advance of becoming or needing a healthcare decision. Understanding these different terms used to talk about healthcare directives is important. Many of the terms are confusing and have changed over time as well. An advanced directive is a legal tool, provides policies vary from state to state regarding what types of advanced directives are allowable. Policy and practices are not uniform throughout the US. So that means if you interact with family members in other states, for example, helping parents in Minnesota, and they spend 6 months in Florida, you'd have to have advanced directives that are legal in each of those states. You'll also need to learn about the policies in another state if that does happen. And there is a link to the resources on this slide. And again, we'll send that out to you afterwards so you can find out. And if you are, near retirement age and are looking to winter somewhere, this might be one of the decisions that you want to look at to see what is available in another state. In Minnesota, we do have a healthcare directive and policies regarding to its use and purpose. The last and most recent significant changes were made in 1998. In the 10 years before that, a living will and power attorney for healthcare were approved for an advanced care directive. So there are a few things an advanced directive is not the same as. On the next slide, you'll see kind of a chart that goes through and talks about them. It is fairly common to hear individuals say, oh, I've done that, and when actually they really haven't, because they are confused that, oh, I did a will, or I've done my power of attorney or my living trust, or I have medical orders, and none of those are the same. So we want to emphasize that you should take the time to find out and verify what advanced care plans do exist, especially if you know you'll be a caretaker for somebody. And then where is the document? When was it revised? A lot of you talked, it's been 5 years or 10 years. So things might have changed. You might have a new medical complication that has shifted your thinking and that kind of stuff. Also, what does it say when it, so that others are clear by your meaning of that. So we do have another poll for you all. And this one is a myth or fact. There is a required healthcare directive form that needs to be used in Minnesota. Is that a myth or is that a fact? So it looks right now we're hanging about almost 75% of you are saying it's a myth. I'm going to go ahead and end polling. So right at 3/4 of you have said it's a myth who were participating. The rest said a fact. And so I will let you know. The answer is a myth. Folks often have a lot of confusion around this. And when you hear my answer, hopefully you'll say, yeah, I knew that. We have a policy in Minnesota that specifies what a healthcare directive should include. However, there is no one required form that has to be used. There are various suggested forms that are available, and they hopefully will meet all the legal criteria of what is required in Minnesota. So as we think about what are the legal criteria for a healthcare directive in Minnesota, what happened when there was that last policy change was there was a goal of really simplifying what was involved with doing a healthcare directive. So in simplifying it, it was not to require any one document because what that committee found was that a lot of providers had their own that they required. There's also competition between forms. And so this was eliminated with that. You can put it literally on a piece of paper if you would want to. So when healthcare directive policies were changed, it's important to understand that as, again, that it doesn't have to be a difficult process. It's also important to think about what is known is most individuals will need prompts and some structured questions to answer in order to develop a quality healthcare directive. Most of us don't have experience creating a healthcare directive, and we need some guidance. And so we don't know exactly what to think about when naming a healthcare agent. For some individuals, a form can be really intimidating and we want to keep it simple. So, you can start with a piece of paper and put down your wishes, say I'm naming so-and-so, and this is who they are, and sign it and follow the 6 rules of it has to be written, it has to be dated, it needs to state the person's name of who this healthcare directive is for. It has to be executed by a person with capacity to do so and verified by a notary or 2 witnesses, and include either health instructions, a healthcare power of attorney, or both of those things. So here's our next slide. We'll talk a little bit about the suggested process and form. The suggested form was designed to be able to complete on your own. It includes the 3 key parts of an enclosed healthcare directive to help individuals make more informed decisions. There's also a toolkit that includes definitions of terms, duties, roles, and powers. And we'll be sending this toolkit in our follow-up email as well so that you all will have it. So if you haven't had a chance, to do that, make sure you download the form and check or download the healthcare planning directive form and be able to review it and look at it. And the nice thing is it is a fillable PDF if you have that capability. So you can type your choices, you can edit it, and then you can print it, and then you can edit the next year if something has changed or you've changed your decision, and then print it. And so you don't have to start over every time with a small directive change. If you're going to find legal the documents that meet the criteria in Minnesota, and you don't have it in front of you, we're going to walk you through it. So most individuals know what kind of information to share about details and the kinds of choices they are making. It includes, I pretty much covered this. It is in English and Spanish as well, and it is free. So we did talk a little bit about decision-making incapacity and what exactly does that mean? In Minnesota, it is defined as the ability to understand the significant benefits, risks, and alternatives to proposed healthcare and to make and communicate decisions. This definition is specific to healthcare decisions and does not include the capacity to make other types of decisions, such as stock market investments, balancing checkbooks, kind of that financial aspect of it. The definition also should sound familiar to most of us. When determining capacity might sound simple, it is not at all. The realities of dementia offer many challenges to assessing capacity. Healthcare providers have the role of deciding who has healthcare decision-making capacity. If I have my healthcare directive signed, I've got a legal document. As long as I have capacity, I am in charge, and the provider should be talking to me personally. When that doesn't happen, you will be then talking to your healthcare, they'll be talking to your healthcare agent. So what exactly is a healthcare agent? And ideally, if you will name a healthcare agent as well as leave instructions for them, but you can just name a healthcare agent and hope that they remember all your conversations about what you did or did not want. So when it comes to healthcare agents, they are under no legal duty to act. They must be available and willing to serve when needed. That's why when we were talking earlier, I said it's really important to ask the person before you name them as your healthcare agent. So it's not a surprise because they may not decide to act then because they are not prepared for it. Healthcare agents don't have to sign the form and agree to be named when you complete your HCD, but it is nice to know. And that's why it's essential to talk with your healthcare agents to see if they're willing to serve and go along with your wishes. Don't surprise your family or friends by naming this position without discussing it with them. Healthcare providers often will consult with family members, but it's very helpful if providers know and your family members know who has been legally determined to act. As you prepare your directive, you'll really work on picking somebody that has qualities you desire in a decision maker. So make sure, again, that they are willing. And so what does it mean that they are willing to act? So before we go on, we're going to review Anna and Jose. And, a lot of you had put in what you thought or who should determine what. And so here is what Rick came up with and what Anna's parents and two sisters. So again, Rick had talked about, we believe Anna would not want further treatment given earlier conversations about the probability of no recovery and future quality of life. Again, Anna's parents wanted to prolong life. A lot of you picked Rick, but as you can see, sometimes, this might be tricky. Rick does know Anna's wishes. Anna's parents and two sisters may not have had that conversation recently. And they might also agree that, they might believe that everything should be done in their power to help Anna live along. But Rick is looking at the quality of life, and they've had that conversation, so he knows a little bit more. With Jose, he's 70. Most people, I don't think I saw anybody say that they wanted the daughter living in another state to be his person, but there was pretty evenly split between the two siblings and a special friend of who should be making Jose's decisions. So when we think about selecting decision makers, when we look at Anna and think about who you had selected, it's important to think about, like, we're not all going to agree on what we're looking for when it comes to our healthcare agent. It will vary on our values and our beliefs and conversations we have. So it's important to think about what are the qualities of an agent that you would want. So for the next slide, the qualities of agents, there's some things to know. So first of all, they have to be 18 years of age or older. We want to make sure we have somebody who can cope with making difficult decisions. And they're often, complicated in the event of incapacities. So somebody who is trustworthy and able to make decisions underneath stress. When we're thinking about Anna's case study, think about the person you pick. What assumptions were you making about the qualities of the person you picked as her decision maker? So when we're considering that some family members, including spouses and adult children, may not be ideal candidates, experience in family suggests that some family members may be too closely connected emotionally to be able to carry out your wishes, or have very different beliefs and attitudes, making it difficult to follow through with your wishes. Think carefully about what qualities you want in an agent in your life makes sense. Have some conversations with that person, and you may have to do some homework to really figure who this person is. A common mistake people make is picking the adult child who lives the closest to them geographically. Geography isn't the issue that it was 20 years ago. It may also be that it's really the wrong person because they don't meet any of the other criteria other than they are physically available. So because of technology, anybody can really be present and involved in decisions. And I think we've all learned that this past year. People also tend to naturally think, I have to pick a family member, and we automatically go there. And as well as going with the oldest family member, you also want to think about, like, a lot of people are outliving their family members, so keep that in mind. It could be a friend or a niece or a nephew as well. One of the biggest mistakes people do when they do this is without thinking much about the who and the why, and pick the wrong person. So really spend some time about the qualities and who is important in your life. So as we think about how many healthcare agents can be appointed to make decisions for you, what is your guess? And you can put those into the chat. So I have a guess of 2, 3. What else do we have? Well, so a lot of 2, 4, 3 or more. So, so you can name more than one person. And there's pros and cons about that. We're going to talk about it on the next slide, some decisions to make when it comes to that. So it's important to know that when you are picking healthcare agents, and if you do select 2 or more, I talked earlier about selecting my brother and sister-in-law and then having them work together, that they can choose, you can choose them to act together or by themselves. When you're thinking about it, think variation in cultural groups. And your culture, sometimes that is more, different cultures are based in more of a family decision versus an independent decision making. It also helps allow parents to avoid having to select one adult child or spouse when preferring to include all as a decision makers. However, a group of people may find it difficult to be available and to agree to what the decision is going to be. So guidelines for the decision process need to be included. It's also important to name an alternate agent. So that is in case your main agent is unavailable or unwilling to carry out your wishes, have another person as a backup who might be able to do that. You can also change the powers of the agent if you have capacity. In this process, you'll make decisions about what power you're giving them And that's also explained in the document we'll be sending you. Basically, you're given the power to make all kinds of decisions and get access to the information that you would have as the individual. So new in 1998, even if you are able to make decisions or speak for yourself, you may opt for someone else to make the decisions for you. So think about a 95-year-old mother wants her son to make all decisions, even though she has capacity. Since she trusts her son and does not want to be bothered with details, she may choose to not be involved. It's also important to identify who would make the decisions about your body after you die. This is often the same person, but may not be necessarily. And when Lori had talked about the I'm not saying that.
Shivo.
Shivo, I was like, nope, not Dr. Shivago. Shivo case. It reflected conflict among the family members, not only while she was living, but also after her death. The conflict then related to what would happen to Terry's remains and the related rituals, thinking of her memorial, funeral, burial, cremation, all that stuff. You may also choose to limit an agent's powers, and you can find that on the healthcare directive form that we'll send. I'll turn it back over to Lori.
Okay, and so now we know the who part of it and who you want to make decisions, but now we're going to take a look at leaving instructions. And it's really helpful to know who you would want, but what you would want is also important. So we'll take a look at the second part of the document, and again, we'll be sending this on to you. Remember, the purpose here is to make sure that decisions are based on your values, preferences, and wishes. And what we found, however, is that people really need help with leaving instructions. In your toolkit, you'll find a worksheet that walks you through the choices and how to go about leaving those, making those choices, and what those treatments would be that you might want. What you feel about and how you feel about treatments like resuscitation and CPR, and making sure that you understand what each treatment involves. And I know that as I was completing my healthcare directive, even though I thought I knew what those treatments involved, when I read the procedures, I think it was more involved than I ever imagined. And so understanding what those treatments are about really can help you. And you also want to think more broadly about your religious and spiritual beliefs and how they influence those end-of-life decisions. So what are some examples in Anna's case of things that you thought were most important that others should know as you think back to the situation where Anna was in a head-on car crash? What were those things that were most important? If you want to put those in the chat, if you can remember them. I think as I think about it, that she and her husband had previously had discussions around what was the prognosis, what was the potential future for recovery. Yes, Ruby, quality of life, certainly a part of that. And so those are critical questions that you need to take a look at. Think about what's most important that you would want others to consider. And think about those feelings that you have about very specific medical treatments. I know in the last year when we're thinking about COVID, thinking about being on a ventilator and when that treatment might be ceased, things like that. Many of us haven't really thought about those issues until this past year, and hearing stories about people that have had to deal with those situations. What are your beliefs and feelings about quality and length of life? And what are your wishes for care when you're dying? How do you feel about organ donation, tissue donation, other body parts? Those are very specific kinds of things to think about and to talk about. And so when you're leaving instructions, you may either fill in the space provided, or you could add just an additional page or the worksheet that's in the healthcare directive toolkit. And so people do have very strong opinions about things like quality and length of life. They have very clear choices to make and maybe clear thoughts about what would happen related to organ donation or tissue donation, and you can help to think those things through and leave your information for another to make that decision for you. So your preferences and wishes are always under construction, and it's going to take some time to think through concerns or fears. What are the most important things you think your agent should know when making these decisions for you? And you also have to realize that over time, you know, as we've all been through COVID, maybe thoughts have changed about various treatments. Over time, we change our opinions of things based on the experiences that we've had. And so it's important to realize that you can come back and make changes. You don't have to complete all the questions or blanks. You can add additional statements or comments either now or at another time. Don't expect that you will have all of these answers immediately, and that's okay. And avoid prepared or canned answers without carefully reviewing them, because you may, you know, as you begin to look at some of the treatments, you may have some questions, you may have some concerns, and just writing something in right away may kind of stick with you, and you may want to come back and revisit that. So helpful questions include what's most important that I think people should know in making decisions. And what if I can't communicate? What would I want people to know related to specific treatments? What are the concerns or fears? And what should I understand about each of these treatments? And your planning really needs to focus on your values and wishes and what's most important. You have no right answers here, and what's actually right is what's important to you, and encourage you to leave instructions in a way that is easiest for you. Most people as agents are delighted when they have more information, and the quality of the information makes a difference. So the more information, the more detail you can give, the better. And that will help them to actually make better choices for you. And so if we think about any of the factors that influence your preference and wishes, there's a variety of things. And we all think, again, quite differently about leaving instructions. It'll take time and may involve talking with several people. So don't expect to be able to just sit down and do this in an hour. And here are some examples of factors that may influence your preference about what you would want and how you would approach that advanced care planning. Now, if the diagnosis is known and is something that's fairly predictable, what would you want your family members to know, or your agent to know about those items? Is that a different kind of situation than if there is a lot of unknown? Another thing that might be an influence is if you have had good or bad experiences with death and dying. And we've all had experiences that influence how we feel about things. And again, that comes back to, you might make some changes based on your experiences. Another thing to remember is that families have unwritten rules about who gets to decide certain decisions or to have input. And so understanding your family is truly important. Understanding how your family operates is important. We all come from different backgrounds and different experiences, different family scenarios. And so you may find major differences in values and preference, which is interesting, even within the same family. You know, your siblings, you may have grown up in the same household, but may have very different views on a variety of things. Also be aware of assuming that you will have the same preference as your spouse, partner, or adult children, or your parents. As I stated earlier, you may think you know, but you may not know. And you will want to consider what to do plus what you don't want to do, and so, or to be done. So it's important to think about that as well. Again, related to COVID-19, we all know that there are all kinds of uncertainties and risks related to COVID-19, and just to guide you to a few resources. And I was interested to look when I was looking back at some of the resources. I hadn't been looking in the past year because I haven't really taught this content in the past year, but looking back to see that there were COVID-19 guides at all of these sites where we will be guiding you for additional information and other forms that you may want to look at. And so some are from a national perspective, some are from a state perspective. And it's really eye-opening to read more about some things related to ventilators, how they're placed, what happens when they're removed, and things like that. And so there's a lot of different issues around COVID-19 that we need to recognize in the health system. So we're talking about breathing. We may also be talking about dialysis if kidney function is limited, if organs are shutting down, and thinking about resuscitation and CPR. Again, there are a lot of resources here that will help you with understanding what those treatments are. And it's a good thing to have conversations with providers about these items as well and their impacts. And so you see the link on your screen, but there are also, you'll see as we get into some of the other resources, many of them are repeated here. It's just that they have updated some materials to share some COVID materials as well. So I really appreciate that when I look back at the resources and see that there are some things that are very relevant to today's issues. And Sam, I'll let you continue.
Great. So we're on the last part of making this document legal. We've talked about this before, but again, it must be signed and dated, either be witnessed by a notary republic or to individuals. And there are limits on who can witness, and that is in that healthcare directive as well. Some other important steps include, where to keep copies. And we actually had a person ask this in the chat as well. So in order to help improve the chances that your wishes will be known when needed, Lori, if you would go to the next slide, you want to know where to keep and not keep copies of your healthcare directive. Discuss your wishes with those named as decision makers, and then keep a master list of where copies are and the date you sent it to them. So if you update it, you know exactly to go. And part of the conversation was, how about electronically? And so my suggestion was to email it to yourself and to your, children or others who might be called if there's a medical emergency and you're incapacitated, as well as your healthcare agents, and put it into a full folder on your email. And have them put it in a folder in their email so they don't have to go back, 3 years looking for this document. I wouldn't recommend doing like a Google document or those other kind of public access documents. It's, healthcare decisions do have some privacy, and so that would be a better option for that. Ideally, you do want your healthcare providers and family members and your agents to know your wishes. Most medical and healthcare providers will ask especially if you're having surgery or something, if you have a healthcare directive, if you haven't ever had surgery but do have a healthcare directive, where you go on a regular basis or those places near you, make sure to give it to them, so a copy to them so that they have it. And don't keep it hidden away in your safe deposit box because we want to make it available. So we've talked a lot about, this is an ongoing process and are you up to date? So on the next slide, we'll see that it is an ongoing process. We don't want people to, put something in writing and think that they can't change it again. You can always change it and you can always revoke it as long as you have the capacity to do so. Over time, your wishes are going to change. And so that's why it's good to, use a fillable PDF, electronic file, so that you can update it when those happen. It's important to reevaluate your wishes and keep them up to date. Preferences can be influenced by our health status, our family relationships and dynamics, and experiences with others needing end-of-life care. So it's kind of one of those, the more we know, the more things influence. Your healthcare providers should follow the latest expressed wishes, and that's why these documents are dated. And make sure, again, when your changes occur, that you let all of those people you gave a copy to a new copy as well. So in the chat, we're just going to ask you, are healthcare providers required by law to follow my healthcare directive? And I know we had a question earlier about this not happening. And we have a few no and quite a few yeses. So by law, healthcare providers are required to follow your healthcare directive. And by law, your family members are expected to follow your healthcare directive as well. So the answer is yes, they are required. Are there exceptions that you will hear about? Absolutely. The point is most healthcare providers are delighted when they have decisions about things that are put in writing. It makes everybody's decisions a lot easier. So know that the intent is that decisions really do make a difference in your care. So it's important to have that conversation. Reinforce the conversations about preferences and wishes are at the heart of advanced care planning. Don't let the form dominate. The most important thing is that you're having conversations and you're sharing things, and it's really, really important to have everybody on the same page and to understand. I'll turn it back over to Lori.
Okay, we're going to go through a few resources, and I wish we had more time, but I'd really encourage you to go on to some of these links and check out some of the videos and some of the conversations that are around advanced care planning. And so you see here the conversation project. There's videos available here. But again, somebody had asked about different languages for forms and such. There are a variety of different cultural guides related to the conversation project as well. So check those out. These are really great resources. And I know I've checked them out a number of times. Honoring Choices Minnesota. This one was developed in Minnesota. I believe this was TPT that did this one, if I'm not mistaken. And so you can check this out again. There are videos here, faith and culture, identity perspectives here that again, there are videos and conversations among family members with healthcare providers, a wide variety of resources available. And so then we're going to do a poll. And again, we want you to be thinking about which of these activities do you plan to do next? We've had some time to think about this. Some of you said you were in the very beginning of planning. Others were going to need to do some updating. So what do you think you're going to do next? Talk with important others, learn from some of the resources we've provided, choose those healthcare agents, identify your preferences, complete the Minnesota Health Care Directive, possibly communicate your decisions with important others, or review your decisions in written documents. We'll let a few more people make a choice here. Okay, and what we're seeing is, oops, my poll just got covered up. I'll have to check this out again. So I'm not seeing my poll results. Sam, can you share those?
Yes,
right
I can
now?
share them. So majority
Okay.
of you said to talk with important others. And then the next big one was communicate my decisions with important others. So really the communication seems to be the first one. And that's really the first step, especially if you are reviewing or just starting, is to start talking with people, with your medical professionals, and figuring out what it is you want and all the different circumstances you may have.
Wonderful, thank you. And so we just want to move on and remind you, be prepared. Be prepared for those changes that can happen in health and decision-making capacity. And remember that you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for family members, for those healthcare providers, so that they all can make the decisions that you would want in place. And we know that, in medical science, they've created great possibility of extending physical life beyond what some individuals may define as acceptable. The majority of deaths are preceded by decisions based on medical treatment and care. And that really makes for some dilemmas for families and decision-making regarding the life and death decisions for family members. And so life and death decisions become even more complex over time when family members lack the ability to make their own decisions and communicate those decisions. And what happens when a person's not able to make those decisions for themselves? So we hope that you have found some resources here to help you think through those items and to act on them as well. Sam?
Yeah, so we do have an evaluation that I just put into the chat for those of you who are attending, if you would be willing to complete that. If you don't have time now, it'll also be included in the follow-up email that will be coming out in the next week. And then we'll also have a follow-up email in a few months to share how you've used the information and resources from that. If you were participating for a professional reason and would need a certificate of participation, you can email Sara Croymans at her email address there, and that will of course be followed also in the follow-up email. We do have some more upcoming webinars. So we have When It's Family, Financial Exploitation of Older Adults. So that's more on the finances side. Marlene Stem, one of our professors and faculty with Extension, will be teaching that one. And then we also have a couple of disaster preparedness, and we do offer webinars offered in Spanish. And we're currently planning webinars starting again in April, mid-April. So if you want to be included in that, you can always go to the Z link to find out. We do encourage you to engage with us on social media, and we have Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, etc. That you're more than welcome to check us out and keep up to date. And we do announce all of our webinars on that as well. And so we do thank you for joining us today. If you have questions, put them into the chat, and Laura and I will, I know we missed a few, so I've been trying to go back to find them. And so between Laura and I will answer those. We also realize we're getting really close to 1 o'clock. So if you do, or to noon, not 1 o'clock. So if you do need to leave us, we totally understand that.
So thank you. And we will answer some questions if you still have others that we can get to.
Yes. We had a participant who said advanced directives were ignored by the skilled nursing facility that their mother was in. Is there a way to ensure directives are attended to?
Is there a personal physician that could have a copy of them? I know that there is an additional piece, and I'm not remembering the term for it right now, but there is an additional piece that can be provided to emergency staff that can assist as well. So, and again, I think those are in the toolkit and likely on all of those other websites that we provided. But I would see if there was a personal physician that would have it, and then also emergency staff that could be provided the information.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is, whenever, anything we do, we need to advocate for ourselves and for our loved ones. And so if they had the advanced directives and it wasn't being carried out, to have a conversation with them, have a conversation with the director of nursing, bring in that personal physician or somebody else as well, would be important. Our next question is, if there is an advanced directive in place and a person lives alone, is there a good place to have it posted in the home in case of emergency for EMTs?
The one place that I think of where everybody posts things and is the refrigerator door, where it's something that people tend to see right away. I've also seen some agencies on aging will give you a little card that says important information, and it's bright red and could contain the information that you need, or where to find the healthcare directive. I've seen some of those kinds of things too. And again, those are kind of usually posted somewhere where
it's very visible, like the refrigerator door or near the telephone or something. So
Yeah, or even on the wall as you go out, as the EMTs are carrying you out, you might have a big red sign that says important information located here, and then behind say where it's stored and kind of stuff too. So yep. Okay. Is there a 5 wishes document that you will reference later, or am I thinking of something different?
yeah, that was on, I think it's on Honoring Choices. I believe it's on that website. And I think I had posted that it would be on the information. Yeah, I want to say it's on the Honoring Choices website.
Debbie asked, do we have a form for other things that should be discussed with her mother that she can go through? So they've been working on the Advanced Healthcare Directive, but she knows there are many other things I need to discuss with her. Lori's been around longer than I have, so I'm going to default to her because I haven't seen anything in our materials, but Lori might know something different.
The only thing I'm thinking about is related to the who gets grandma's yellow pie plate information, the personal property kinds of things. As long as you're going through a variety of subjects related to this, you may want to consider that along with the will, and you probably already talked about wills as well.
Great. And our last question is it recommended to have an attorney assist with preparing an advance directive? And I would say we don't have that recommendation with the healthcare directive tutorial we'll be sending. It really does take you step by step through it. However, if it makes you feel more comfortable to have an attorney look at it, that's a personal decision.
And I mean, they certainly would work through that with you if you chose to do that. They will charge you for that when you have the toolkit, basically to do it yourself. You could certainly take it to them. I assume they would have a notary if you need that to be notarized. And you may just have them look at it and see that you've missed, that you've covered everything that you intended to. But again, they will charge you for that when this is something that you can take control of and handle for yourself.
Yeah. And Terry just mentioned that she's making a list of music and songs she'd like to have in her celebration of life. So she is going through it all. And that is, I think, a great idea. So thank you, everybody. Lori and I will stick around for a little bit longer to keep answering questions, but then we'll end the webinar.